G'day everyone and welcome. Joining me is one half of the Trek Geeks podcast. We call him Trek Geek, Dan, and he's on the phone for me right now. Dan, thanks so much for your time.
Hey Matt, thanks so much for having me on. I'm thrilled to be here. I've watched your stuff for so long, and to be a guest, I'm quite honored. Thank you very much.
Well, fantastic, man. I really appreciate it. Now, I do understand that you're very similar to me in that you have a face for podcasting. And so we can't see you. We shouldn't see you. Is that right?
I think that's right. I think my podcast partner, Bill, would definitely agree with you, but I'd rather have people listen to my mellifluous tones than look at my somewhat scary-looking face. So, yeah, I guess we could say that.
The unfortunate thing for my audience is that I've spent 12 years in the television industry here in Australia, so I have to produce video for some strange OCD reason. So unfortunately, they have to stare at this all the time. Which is why I let the guests speak more and just focus on their camera angle. So that's it. But the reason we are chatting today, of course, is for the first time in our histories, we have fresh Trek to talk about on our podcasts. How excited have you been over these 9 weeks?
Oh, it has been a phenomenal 9 weeks. Being a Trek fan and having new Trek to talk about is something that I have just been longing for so long. And now that we're involved in podcasting and have been for a couple of years, this is brand new territory for Bill and I. We launched a new podcast called Discovering Trek just to focus in on the episodes every week. And we are just having a blast, and we're really enjoying what we're seeing so far.
Isn't it cool to be able to talk about fresh things each week? There's new things for us to sink our teeth into.
It really is amazing. I mean, there's 700 hours plus of episodes to talk about over the course of the last 50 years, and we talk about a lot of them, whether it be on Trek Geeks or here with you or anywhere else on the internet. But wow, to talk about something that we haven't seen before, and it's fresh, and we don't know what to expect, and we're seeing cliffhangers and plot twists. It just is a great time to be a Trek fan. I'm so happy for what's going on right now, because it gives people who love Trek the ability to enjoy new Trek and see new voyages boldly going. And you know what the rest is, so I won't finish that.
And we're also seeing some interesting things that are breaking the mold of what we thought Star Trek was. And it's polarizing fans. It's been very interesting. One example from this week, of course, is that infamous flashback scene of Lieutenant Tyler and those Klingon boobies. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know what? When it happened the other night here, when it was first run on CBS All Access, I actually had a flashback to a Super Bowl, the first Super Bowl that my New England Patriots won, when Janet Jackson was doing the halftime show and had her infamous wardrobe malfunction. When that happened, I was kind of like, "What? Wait a minute! What just happened?" And this week, with that scene, I did the exact same thing. I was, did I just see what I thought I saw? And it's amazing to see, Matt, what has been happening online over the past couple of days with regards to that specific scene. Now, a lot of people are upset that Star Trek did what it did. I mean, we had an F-bomb a few weeks ago with Tilly, and now we're seeing Klingon breasts on television, and that is something that people take issue with. My concern with that scene is that we were seeing Ash pretty much be violated by L'Rell. And I really wish that more of the conversation would be about that. Now, there is a lot of conversation about that going on right now, but it seems that the focus is a little bit off kilter, I think, when we really want to dissect what we were seeing in that scene. But for all intents and purposes, in my opinion, Lieutenant Tyler's getting raped in this scene, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot about that. Everybody's up in arms because we saw boobs. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and that's right. And there is one particular individual online that spent a lot of time. It's not a very long scene, so he must have spent a very long time to get exactly the right screen grab to put to cover them up, and like you're saying, I mean, they completely missed the point of the whole thing. The way that it was done, it wasn't gratuitous, I don't think. It was so quick in a flashback sense, and the way that the character reacted to that memory, I think, is, as you said, exactly what we should be focusing on.
Absolutely. I think that Shazad did an amazing job in this episode with the flashbacks and the post-traumatic stress syndrome that he's facing. And those flashbacks, here's my personal take on the flashback. When this all first started and we were introduced to Ash Tyler, people were talking about, oh, maybe he's Volk because Volk has disappeared and he was going to have to sacrifice everything. And I was like, nah, come on, that's just ridiculous. Well, you know what? Over the course of the last couple of weeks, my tune has changed. And my personal opinion, and I could be 100% wrong because that happens all the time, is these flashbacks of the quote-unquote torture, to me, I think could have been surgery to alter Volk to be human and then have his memory erased and have new memories implanted so that he is a sleeper agent on Discovery. We saw something really strange at the end of the episode when he confronted L'Rell and she said that she would never let harm come to him and those things. So things are kind of are changing with my thought process is, yeah, this could really be Volk, and it'll be interesting to see if that happens in either chapter 2 of this season or maybe in season 2. It'll be quite interesting to see.
One of the fan theories online is that the actor who played, or the actor who was credited to play as playing Vogue, doesn't actually exist beyond a shell of an IMDb page, and that it in fact was Ash Tyler. And whether this is, as you say, this is all coming about. My sister doesn't believe it. She said it's too obvious for it to actually be a thing, and she's more convinced that it really was a human Klingon sexy time, and B'Elanna Torres is going to be born.
That's great. Now, one of the things that I've also thought about, which could take away from my thought process of what I think might happen, is we saw what happened with the Klingons and the augments on Enterprise, and how the whole Klingon ridges and Klingons in the TOS era look human came about. So is it possible that they could have used that virus to have Volk transform into human instead of going through surgery? Who knows? There's a whole bunch of things that could happen. But I will say this about it. Whatever happens, and I think we'll get into this in more detail as we talk here today, I have 100% faith in the writers of Discovery to do the right thing from the Star Trek canon point of view. These people know what they're doing. They understand the Star Trek history more than I think people give them credit for. So I, for one, have no concern that it's not going to be answered in a way that will make sense in the Star Trek universe. What do you think?
I agree. I think that there has been a lot made about how in focus, how in depth the writers are taking the canon that has come before. And sure, the look is not the 1966 the Cage bridge from the Enterprise, but I don't think that would have sold as much as it has in 2017 with the fresh new look, with the ship, with the bridge, with the Klingons, with the uniforms, with the characters. I mean, people are saying that the characters can't be fighting amongst themselves and it all has to be professional and all the rest of it because that's Jean's original vision. I woke this morning to someone criticising my recent post on Facebook about how all of these people are all storms in a teacup because Jean's original vision was so small. It's not an insult to Jean. He could never have imagined how big this series would have become and how much it would need to evolve with the times that were changing. I mean, exactly the same things were being said about the Next Generation compared to the original series. I suppose there at least they went forward in time. I do wish that we had have gone post-Voyager, but But I'm loving where we are, and it's a fascinating time that they've created, and it's a time that we don't know too much about.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Matt. Evolution. Things are evolving. TV has evolved. This isn't 1969 anymore. People have watched Trek for 50 years, and they got to understand that things change, and television is one of those things that change along with everything else. Look at shows like The Walking Dead or Game of Thrones. These are all shows that we never would have even imagined 15 or 20 years ago. And now it's kind of the norm. And I think in order for Star Trek to succeed in today's world, it has to evolve. People have talked about Gene's vision a lot. You just mentioned it a moment ago. And, you know, I certainly would never disrespect Gene in any way. He's done so much for the Star Trek universe, but let's face it, when he wrote Star Trek back in the 60s, he was looking to make a TV show to make money. He never thought for a second that it would evolve into what it has evolved in over the past half century. And things change. You mentioned it a second ago as well. People did not want TNG to come out when it came out because it wasn't going to be Kirk and Spock, and look at how successful that was. The same thing with all of the other shows, Deep Space Nine, Enterprise, Voyager. They all have had their different levels of success, but they have all evolved from the previous show, and I think this show, Discovery, is the perfect example of how television continues to evolve and can evolve in a positive way.
And it was an interesting approach. After 12 years off the air, it was a very interesting approach in how they did that pilot, and how that's what was released, and it wasn't actually what was going to be the series. I think that the pilot set the tone for the way this show is going to be so different. Sure, we're going to have these episodes over here. We might even have this storybook narrative, and perhaps season 2 is going to be completely different to season 1, and it's not necessarily going to follow on chronologically as the other series have done.
I actually love the idea of episodic television. We didn't see anything really tied together with the original series in any way. There were a couple of references to past episodes here and there. I was just watching an episode recently where Kirk calls for the destruction of the Enterprise using the Corbomite device recently installed, which is a flashback to the Corbomite maneuver, of course, but you didn't really start getting into episodes that had ties to each other in depth until Deep Space Nine. They did it a little bit in Next Generation, but DS9 was when the first arcs really came into play. I love the idea of what they're doing with Discovery, where the whole season is one arc, and I look forward to seeing how Chapter 2's arc mixes in with what we saw in Chapter 1 and how it lays the ground for Season 2, which we'll see hopefully in early 2019.
Enterprise really broke the ground following on from DS9, season 6 DS9, sorry, I will correct that thought, because early DS9, season 6, created that 6-episode arc where they lost the station and they fought to get it back. Then they expanded on that in season 7 to end the series with the 9-episode arc. Enterprise took it to a whole new level and did a 24-episode arc, chasing down the Xindi superweapon. And then season 4, then they realised, I think they really realised, and I think that worked, because in season 4, they knew they were cancelled. They wanted to tell all these great stories, and they did it in these 3-episode arcs. So it's not unprecedented to have storybook narratives in Star Trek. It's unique to have it in this way on a paid pay-per-view streaming platform, so, as you said, Game of Thrones, Walking Dead, or Game of Thrones at least, they're all they're those pay-per-view type shows. They're not on free-to-air anymore, and I think that it frees them from the constraints of ratings, and you must appease the audience every week. And you can't do that in scripted television because you have to shoot and produce months in advance. You don't know what the audience is going to do, and I think that's where. And I should be careful because I work in free-to-air television here in Australia, but I think that's where free-to-air has its little bit of its downfall in 2017, because people want it and they want it now. It's an interesting approach that they went weekly release on Discovery, but I think that it keeps the conversation going. And here we are 9 weeks after that first episode launched, and we're still talking about it, and we've only just learnt about things that are happening with our characters that we met 9 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. One of the things that first of all, let me back up, and I love the character development that we're seeing on Discovery. Saru is one of my favorite characters, and I just love Tilly. She has been such a breath of fresh air. It's something that I didn't expect to see, and I just love her. But at the same time,
someone so relatable as well.
Absolutely,
I could see myself as that cadet on that ship and being in so much awe. I think that she is a Star Trek fan.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I jotted down from my notes is what I like about Discovery, and especially with someone like Tilly, is we're seeing quote-unquote real life from these people. We're seeing people excited and nervous and open their mouth before they should and say something that they shouldn't, like Tilly did last week. But we're seeing a starship that's throwing parties, and we're seeing people have romances on a starship. We never really saw that, quote-unquote, before. So I think it's great to see. But at the same time, the character development is so great. There is so many characters on the show that I think we're missing out on some of the character development from people that we don't see a lot, but see enough of to be curious about. And by that, I mean people on the bridge like Detmer, who we saw who when she was on the Shenzhou, and then also Ariam, who was some kind of enhanced human. She looks like a robot, but apparently she's not, based on what we've seen on Twitter and Facebook. And some of the other bridge people. I'm hoping that as the show goes on, we'll get more character development for people more than just the main stars. I hope that that's something that we see at least starting with Chapter 2 later on this year.
It's interesting too because I've always felt that Star Trek has too big of an ensemble cast to give sufficient time to. I mean, you can go back to Next Generation, Tasha Yar, Denise Crosby didn't feel like she was going to get enough airtime, so she left. We didn't really explore Anthony Montgomery in Enterprise.
Yeah.
Poor Ensign Kim never got a promotion in Voyager. We saw far too much of Dr. Bashir in the early seasons before he became a very likeable character. So it's an interesting thing that you obviously have a starship of hundreds of people, but you can't focus on hundreds of people. And perhaps that's where DS9 got it right in being set in a space station, where the setting never changes. It's the people that come that are always changing, and people will come back. Gul Dukat, those sort of characters that developed. Garrick, Kai Wynn, all of those characters developed purely because they kept coming back to the station. But in terms of Discovery, I think that it's fantastic that we are finally seeing repercussions for their actions. As you said, Dan, it's not something that Star Trek's really done. It's been confined to that single episode, and next week we're going to move on to the next planet and we're going to explore something else. And well, I know that you mutinied last week, but that's all forgiven this week.
Exactly.
This time around, Burnham, she mutinied and started a war with the Klingons, and 7 episodes later, we're still dealing with it. It wasn't just a little skirmish off to the side that was easily forgiven. And I think that, again, as you said, makes it much more believable and much more likeable.
It's really great to see something like that, not only with Burnham, but look at Lorca. Lorca has a history with the Admiral. He kind of freaks out a little bit after they have their special time together, and she's going to take the ship away from him. So you know that he's plotting. That's not going to happen. And we've seen little bits of things every week as to what he's going to do and to the extremes that he'll go to in order to keep his ship. I personally think that he put everything into motion by sending Cornwell on the mission to meet with the Klingons, and then she ultimately got captured. And I think he personally was hoping that maybe she got killed so he would keep his ship. Now, that hasn't happened, but there are other things that he's doing, as we saw with the season finale with, I don't know, changing the coordinates for the last spore jump. And I'm just throwing that out there. That might have just been a mistake, right?
Well, it's possible, but yeah, and the theories online abound as to whether Lorca is from the mirror universe and he's sending this powerful ship back. But I don't see the writers destroying the mirror universe canon, because unless it's more powerful than what the Empire has in the mirror universe, and then when Kirk goes over in the original series, changes things around, and that's how the Empire loses its power, or whether in fact we were in the mirror universe this whole time, and we're going to open episode 10 with a fantastic looking Constitution class starship. But then I think that destroys what I said in the beginning in terms of we need to move forward.
Right. I'm along the lines, Bill mentioned this in our latest podcast over on Discovering Trek, that he feels that they were brought into the mirror universe as we understand it, and that they're going to spend the better half of the second chapter of the season trying to figure out a way to get home, and as a result will be stealing some kind of technology from the ISS Discovery. So Jonathan Frakes alluded to the fact that the mirror universe, there was going to be at least one mirror universe episode this season. He is actually directing the episode that will start the second half of this season. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I remember seeing a screen grab on Twitter a couple of weeks ago with Jason Isaac sitting in the captain's chair, and someone zoomed in on the dedication plaque at the back of the bridge, and it was ISS Discovery. So I guess we'll see. I personally am looking forward to seeing a mirror universe. I'm a huge mirror universe fan, but at the same time, for me to be happy with it, the writers, which I said I have total faith in, will need to make sure that they do it in a way that when they get back to our universe, nobody knows or finds out that they were in another universe, because when Kirk and Spock go there, it's the first time that the Federation visited it. So I'm gonna put my faith in the writers that they'll do it the right way.
I think that's what it's all about as well, is that the faith that the writers are going to tell us some interesting stories, and they've proven over 9 episodes that they're not going to jump the shark as much as J.J. Abrams did with the 2009 movie.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Now, I'm also a fan of the J.J. movies, but I do think that there are some things in those movies that could have been done differently. I don't think that this writing staff and the people at Discovery and CBS are going to do anything to jeopardize the Star Trek universe that we know and love, which is the Prime universe, and they've made that very clear, which makes me laugh every time somebody online says, "Oh, this is the JJ verse." It's not the JJ verse, people. It's just not. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do, but I'm looking forward to it. That's for sure.
What are your thoughts on the ship?
Well, it's funny. I was having a discussion when I went out to California for the premiere a couple of months ago. I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine, John Champion, over from Mission Log, and we were talking about the ship, and we hadn't seen Discovery yet. We had only seen the Shenzhou for the first 2 episodes. So after the premiere, we were talking about it, and we caught a glimpse of the ship in the coming attractions teaser at the end of the evening. And I said to John, I said, "Wow, the ship is really cool looking, but that saucer section looks dangerous. There's only a couple of exit ports from the center. And I'll tell you what, if that thing spins like a top, I'm going to be really pissed off, because that's just going to look foolish." And he just kind of had a smirk on his face. Well, as we've seen, it does spin. I don't dislike it as much as I thought I would at the beginning. It's kind of cool. The back end of the starship is a little bulky for me and triangular, but I've gotten used to it over 7 episodes that it's been in now, so I'm fine with it. I'm cool.
It certainly has grown on me, and again, I mean, these conversations were all had when the Next Generation premiered. The only difference was that there was no social media to have an instant reaction to
right.
it. I think that it certainly has, and it's like anything. anything new. People are always concerned by anything new. When they finally bed in with it and begin to understand the way that it works, and it's pretty cool technology, but it'll be interesting to see how the writers close the gap between Discovery and the original series, if indeed they are going to do that. But I don't think it's a big leap to say that there are different classes of ships with different looks and different design standards.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. As a matter of fact, it's not official canon, but I don't know if you've had a chance to read the book Desperate Hours by David Mack. It's the first Discovery novel, and it does a great job of telling backstory between Burnham and Saru and Captain Georgiou. And the Enterprise shows up. I don't want to give away any spoilers for people who haven't read it, but they explain a couple of things that, for me, make perfect sense. They explain the uniform differences. They explain why the ship looks different. This is, like you just said, this is a Constitution class as the Enterprise. The Discovery and the Shenzhou are not Constitution class, so they've decided to go with different looks and different technology. If people had an open mind, everything could be explained in a way that makes sense. It happens here. We don't all drive the same kind of cars. We don't all have the same kind of aircraft flying over our heads. Things are different. Uses of different technology are used today. And it's very easy to think that the same thing could be happening in Star Trek Discovery.
Well, I think an interesting one point that it just popped into my mind was the difference between Boeing and Airbus aircraft. They do the same job, but they're laid out completely differently, and they're flown very differently. So, yeah, I mean, I guess it's people nitpicking for anything to not like, to latch onto, and the dichotomy of it all is very big. That there doesn't seem to be a sort of middle ground for those people that are active on social media. Mm-hmm. You either like it or you hate it, or you love it. There's not too much else. I think that it's a series that's going to grow. I'm not, to be perfectly honest and to be balanced, I'm not 100% on whether this is going to see us out to 7 years, though.
Yeah, television these days, it's very difficult to have series that will go that long. People are new to some of the different forms of getting their television, whether it be CBS All Access or other streaming services. So, that is a gamble. But one thing that's hopeful for me is we've seen recently numbers come out as to the number of subscriptions that CBS All Access has taken on with the start of Discovery, and it's very promising. So hopefully we'll see at least as many seasons as we saw with Enterprise. Of course, I hope that there's a lot more. But one of the things you just talked about, Matt, I wanted to make a comment on, and that's about how people are nitpicking, and it's unfortunate that in today's world we have the social media that we do, because it can be completely aggravating. If you don't like Discovery, that is well within your right to not like it. It's fine. You don't like it. The people say that it's not my Star Trek. Well, you know what? If it's not your Star Trek, then nobody's forcing you to watch it or forcing you to pay for it on CBS All Access or watch it on Netflix in other countries. So that's great. Don't like it. But it's aggravating that people are telling me why I shouldn't like it. To me, this is my Star Trek, and I love it. And I think everyone at CBS and the cast and crew of Discovery are doing a great job, and they are living their dream by telling Star Trek, and they're making my dream of being able to watch more Star Trek come true. So I think it's a great thing.
And it also means for people like us, Dan, new Trek is on while we're in a position to be able to hopefully, possibly, maybe go and see it in action because of these podcasts that we run. That to me is a very cool hope.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And one of the other things that I always like to tell people, my good friend Heather Barker from the Shore Leave podcast and Disco Trek has always said, when there's a new movie or anything that comes out, and of course this series, Discovery, is somebody's first dive into Trek. And we should honor that by being positive about it and not forcing decisions on people as to whether they should like it or dislike it. Let them make their own decision. We've brought in millions and millions of new fans over the years, whether it be the JJ movies or this Discovering Trek. New families are coming on board, and I think it's great. And I love seeing new people come on and meeting them in places like Vegas and listening to new podcasts and having conversations with you for our first time. This is the first time that we've talked. It's great. It's something to be happy about, and I wish there would be more positivity out there.
Fantastic, Dan. Well, we're all out of time on today's Trekzone Spotlight, so I really appreciate it. It's been a wild ride for 9 weeks, or 8 weeks, and looking forward to the second chapter in January.
Absolutely. I can't wait until January. I'm looking forward to the final part of Season 1 and can't wait, of course, until Season 2 next year. And I got to thank you so much for having me on as a guest today, Matt. It really is an honor and privilege, and I wish you all the best success in the future.